Hello and welcome back to my next episode, Dating Tips for Single Women. I'm your host, Antje Boyd, founder of FindTheOneElite.com. And I'm very delighted for you to be here as I'm bringing you brand spanking new experts who bring you new innovative ideas, new ways of thinking, new approaches. Because so many times you ask me, you want a miracle, right? We all just want this miracle to happen, like in a Disney fairy tale. And a miracle is a shift in perception. So today, I have a lovely and very, very experienced and skilled expert here with me today, which is Sarah Cameron. Sarah,
Hi.
say hi.
Hi, Antia. Hello, listeners and watchers.
I'm so delighted to have you with me today, Sarah, and really talk about all your content. I mean, I took notes, and I know a lot. So I'm like, oh, this is going to be very juicy and really adding on to our knowledge base that we have and the supply for the listener. So Sarah Cameron is an MA and is a worthiness psychology, and she's a relationship coach with degrees in marriage and family therapy and psychology. Equal parts heart, soul, psychology, and practical tools. So really grounded. I love that. She helps her clients end their struggle with worthiness, allowing them to create the relationships and businesses that they desire. So in addition to working with individuals, couples, groups, and organizations, Sarah is also an accomplished speaker, and she's spoken on TEDx Talks. So also check her out as well on YouTube and find her amazing TED Talk. What's the name of your TED Talk?
It's called How to Turn Busy into Balance.
How to Turn Busy into Balance. So find her and check out her talk as well. And today I'm really, really delighted we're going to be talking about shame, which is perfect because we just talked about this at our live virtual training yesterday. We touched on shame, and we really have to talk about this, right? We can't really talk about all the secrets, how to be vulnerable without looking weak. If we're like, but I don't want to talk about shame. I mean, don't get me started here, right? So that's what we're going to be talking about today with Sarah, and I'm very delighted to do so, Sarah. So I'm curious to hear from you, what got you really inspired? Because it seemed like from the get-go, you were actually very focused in your educational pursuits and in your degrees choice.
Absolutely, yeah. So I was on my way to becoming a marriage and family therapist, a licensed marriage and family therapist. And for some more context with that, both of my parents are therapists. Mm-hmm. So I actually come from this legacy of therapists, and they're both very, very accomplished in their own right. And my mom has been working with couples for probably 15, 20 years now, and has studied with some really some of the founders of some theories that are really popular today and taken off. And my dad has actually worked with everybody, individuals, kids, families. And so I got my inspiration for beginning this work from them, clearly. And the joke is that I've been training for this my entire life, like all of my 32 years, I've been training for this. And it really helped that I had an interest in it, right? And
yes.
And so I was on my way to becoming a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I had worked in virtually every setting possible. I had worked in a psychiatric hospital, I had worked in long-term care, I had worked in substance abuse, and in private practice. For a lot of, and I would say the majority of people who become licensed in therapy, being able to work in a private practice setting is the ultimate. That's where you want to end up. And so even by the time that I started working in private practice and had a fantastic supervisor there, even then I didn't feel like when I went into the office, I could do that every day of my life. Mm-hmm. And felt like I was nearing burnout. A lot of the time. And so I started to really look at what are some ways that I can still achieve the goal of providing service, of using this knowledge, and of, also making a living. Mm-hmm. And the answer to that was to just kind of shift gears into calling myself a coach rather than continuing on the path of becoming a traditional therapist. Mm-hmm. And this is where some of my own worthiness stuff started to come up. And this is really when I began to focus on this work. And, you know, the teacher needs to go first, right? And so this was 5 years ago that I started my coaching practice. And I felt like, well, maybe I need to go get a licensing or like a coaching certificate, or maybe like I should actually become licensed and then just call myself a coach. So I did this back and forth about like, how can I do this in a way that's actually going to make me feel like I am able and capable to do this?
Mm-hmm.
And so it had to do with just getting some of my own confidence back and being able to really ground down into my own worthiness and to deal with some of my own shame and some of those limiting beliefs that really come up and stop us in our tracks. And it was about December of last year that I started to really see that, because by that point I had worked with a number of people over a number of different kind of areas of life. And it just kind of clicked into place for me. It was like, wow, worthiness is really the one thing that holds everybody back from doing whatever it is that they want to do. And the connection is that when we're not feeling worthy, it's because there's something that's going on with our shame in whatever area. And there's something that needs to be shifted around our shame. And once that's shifted, then we feel worthy.
Yes.
And that's when I began this work.
I love that, right? Because you're not working on the surface, but you're really looking at, it's like exercising, right? Out of the, something is wrong, but you're like, no, it's actually, you need to train this muscle to, you need to strengthen your leg, to strengthen your, I don't know, your abs, right? Like in certain angles, and it's not something you would think about, right? So, meanwhile, you're doing all the push-ups, right? And it's not getting you the stability, really, because that's what I feel like happens. That it becomes, it's like maintainable, right? It's sustainable.
Yeah. One of my clients recently said, they were like, yeah, it's like you're working on the mechanics, like on the structure and the mechanics, rather than like if you throw a heavy weight on bad mechanics, you're going to hurt yourself.
Yes. 100%.
But when you build in proper mechanics, then you can lift anything. You can build that, and you can do it quickly too. That's the other piece of this.
Yes. And of course, we all want quick results, right?
Right, yeah.
So let's dive in. Let's talk about it, because we have like 3 different shame shields, right?
Mm-hmm.
So tell us more about like, what is a shame shield and why is that important to know for us?
Totally. And the fascinating thing that I love about this is that it keeps, like anything else, like any good trend and like anything that really has staying power, it keeps getting renamed and relabeled, but at the core of it, it's the same. Mm-hmm. And so more recently, the shame shields is actually Brene Brown's term for these 3 different ways in which we deal with uncomfortable feelings. And it was, I think, the first person really who discovered this or identified these 3 different ways is Karen Horney. And that was in, I think, 1920.
Oh, I was going to say, now we're going way back.
Yeah. So this is deep within all of us, and it's going to make sense why it's going to become clear. And so there are 3 major ways of dealing with uncomfortable feelings. Shame being like the most core uncomfortable feeling for every human. And it's also ubiquitous. Every single human on the planet experiences shame. Nobody escapes this human experience without having that at some point.
Yeah.
And the other thing about shame is that because it's an emotion, we can't disappear it. We can't selectively numb it. And so it's really something that, like, that's why it has staying power, right? That's why it's so hard to deal with. So it's not actually about like, how do we get rid of shame? It's actually, how do we build shame resilience? Mm-hmm. How do we become more aware of it and learn how to deal with it effectively so that when we're faced with it, we can bounce back faster. And so that recovery time isn't days or even weeks, it's actually just minutes. So the 3 different ways of dealing with shame, the first one, and these are in no particular order, but the first one and the most pervasive that I see for women in particular is called moving towards. And moving towards encompasses perfection, people pleasing, compromising ourselves in order to, and like that's people pleasing, right? Like compromising pieces of us in order to be liked or accepted. And so that is the first and foremost that I talk about, especially with women. And And that one is, I think that one, it's most predominant with women, I think, because we end up like, that's what we're taught when we're little girls. We're kind of conditioned into that, right? And this is across cultures too. It's just like being a good girl, being seen before heard and like following along. And it's also just in our nature as even as little girls to want to like become a part of the community and to really want to be accepted. And so we see and learn very early on that like being liked is going to be like, that's the easiest way to be accepted. And so we learn from a young age to compromise pieces of ourselves or to try to, become part of the mold so that we can be liked. So moving towards is the first way.
So give me like an example when it comes to like dating, right? So let's say a woman is dating a man, and so something happens. So give me like an example. Something happens that triggers shame for her. So let's say he didn't call when she thought he would call. So tell me, how does it look like when she moves towards it?
Yeah. So in that particular example, like if he doesn't call when she, let's be real, when she feels like he should, and it's just like, I thought we had a good time. I don't know why he didn't call. And so let's say like fast forward a few days and he calls her. The way that she would move towards him in that situation is to play it off like it wasn't a big deal, if it was. And so this is the piece of it is like, so in order to move towards something, in order to really be compromising in that kind of a way, then it means that we're going against our own values.
Right. So she's starting to deny really the devastation that she felt. I mean, the women that come to me have the anxious attachment style, right? So they feel high levels of anxiety. The guy doesn't call, then they go through anger, and then what you said, right? Like then they usually move towards and be like, oh, no big deal, And I used to
no problem.
That's what I did.
When really like they were sitting, and I think I think it's probably fair to say that most women have gone through at least a stage of this, if not a significant piece of their life like it, because again, we're conditioned to do this. And so it really is like a woman could be so eager to be going out with this guy, and like attachment style aside, it could just be like, God, we had the best time. We had the best connection. I'm so looking forward to seeing him again. He said he was going to call me. I can't wait until he does. And like, let's say that 3 days pass or 4 days or whatever it is. And by that point, she's feeling kind of dejected and and like, let's also be real. Just maybe that's a deal breaker for her.
Yeah.
Like for me, if a guy says that he's going to call me and he actually says like, oh, I'm going to call you tomorrow. If he doesn't call me that next day, it's not a complete deal breaker, but it lets me know that it's like, okay, so there's something with my boundaries that maybe I need to look into and just show him like, and speak up in that moment. So someone who's moving towards isn't going to speak up in that moment. They're not going to talk about the disappointment. They're not going to talk about any of those uncomfortable feelings, maybe shame, maybe rejection, or any of those. They're just going to say, oh no worries. I was out with a girlfriend anyway. Like it wasn't a big deal. When inside they're just like, why didn't you call me? I thought that we had a good time. I thought that you were going to call me in 2 days and not 4. Like all of those questions go unanswered. And on top of that, it makes us then further question ourselves, makes us question our boundaries, our values. Like, am I making this a bigger deal than it needs to be?
Yes.
Should he really call me? Like, then it starts a vicious cycle. And that's where the shame really begins to grow, is when we start to believe this person, this other person, or just external, let's say external projections onto us of what's reasonable versus our own feelings and our own values and our own boundaries.
Yeah, absolutely. We lose, like I always say, you withdraw from your own confidence bank account, right? Because you're not respecting yourself anymore, right? If you say, oh yeah, it's okay to treat me that way, and maybe I'm overreacting, maybe that's normal that somebody just drops off the earth and calls back 2 weeks later, right? And just, there's also this loss of what's the norm. Like there's sort of like there's no baseline. That's another thing that I see, right? When it comes to moving towards the shame. So yeah, very powerful.
Certainly, yeah.
And so
Yeah.
which one is the next one in that example?
The next one is, let's go to the extreme. So the next one is moving against, which
Okay.
is when you're confronted with an uncomfortable feeling, you come out swinging. You want to hit back harder. You want to either cause more shame or more pain or more discomfort. And so if he calls you 4 days later when he says he was going to call you in 2, that's when you either passively aggressively, like, don't even pick up the phone. You send him to voicemail. You're like, I'm going to call him back and like, I'm going to screen this. I'm going to call him back later. I'm going to call, like, when you were available to pick up the call, just like authentically. And when you really probably wanted to talk to him too, and like find out what was it that was going on. But instead of digging into that feeling and invest in just taking a moment even for yourself, like, it's okay if you don't pick up the phone when he calls, that's fine. And if it's like coming from the right place, right? Like if the intention is just like, oh man, that's kind of triggering me right now. Like I need to come down from this before I talk to him, versus like, I'm not going to pick up his call. Like he didn't call me in 2 days. So moving towards would be, or moving against rather, would be either passively aggressively just not picking up the phone, or picking it up and kind of acting like too cool for school. Like when he's just like, hey, how's it going? I'm sorry. Like maybe there's a legit reason why he couldn't get back to you sooner. But you don't even give him a chance. You're just like, nope, sorry. Like it's not going to work. Like I'm not interested anymore, when really you are. Or just like, how dare you not call me in 2 days when you were going to call me in 4, or just picking up the phone and being super icy. Like any of those would be ways of moving against.
So it's interesting, right? Because the passive aggressive is almost similar to the toward, because you both times you play it down. So how does one make a distinction here?
Yeah, so it's really like, because the moving towards is all about people pleasing. And so if you don't pick up the phone, it's really like, it's passive aggressive if it's in like, it's really in the intention. And so because the idea is that you're trying to make him wait, and like, because he made you wait. So the moving against is really, it's like there's this vindictive vibe under all of it. And it's just like, no, he made me wait, I'm going to make him wait. Like that's moving against. Yeah. And moving towards is really like, you are not coming from this space of feeling better than at all. You are very much like, that's one of the worthiness hustles is what I call it. And it's just like, you're really compromising pieces of yourself in order to try to get this other person to accept you or to be okay with you and your behavior.
Yeah. And it's hard, right? Because in that case also, like, you have to look, because there's like a lot of anger. It's like a lot of opposition. It's like the 8 on the Enneagram, right? Like it's very oppositional. And to also see like, what is that anger inside of you? Like where maybe you need to move anger, period. It doesn't even matter if it has something to do with him. He might just be the button, you know what I mean? But it wasn't like that he brought that anger on, but it's actually activating some sort of anger inside of yourself. Right? Like
Absolutely. Well, and I think the other piece that can get overlooked with moving against, and so here's the thing with all of these, with every single one of these trends, and with every single one of these shields, everybody uses one of them with different people in their lives and in different situations. So you don't use just one shame shield for everybody across your life. You use different shame shields for different people in different situations. And it all has to do with how the situation's making you feel and how it's making you feel threatened and kind of what buttons it's pushing for you. And the thing that I actually love about anger is that anger, and at least in my training and in my background, anger is a secondary emotion. And so it's really like, anger is just the expression of sadness that hasn't been looked at. And like sadness that's felt threatened, and sadness that doesn't feel safe to come out yet. Like that's really what anger is in my experience and in my training. And so if you feel that kind of anger, there's usually a thread of sadness that it's actually linked to. And it's totally appropriate to feel angry at times. Like there's plenty of things that we come into contact every day that's just like, oh yeah, I'm pissed about that. Cool. Be pissed about it.
Yeah.
And there's usually a little piece of sadness in there too.
I actually feel, you know what I feel about, because I've like most women I work with, we're really working with the anger, because the anger is really like the parent of the sadness, right? It's kind of like parenting the sadness and kind of protecting the sadness. So unless they have moved through the anger, like the sadness will not feel safe, right? So it's almost
Oh,
like the
absolutely.
respect, the anger protects sadness, right?
Yeah.
Unless it feels, yeah, because anger is like, you have this illusion that you're on power, right? So you're like, I can't be taken advantage of when I'm in anger. There's no way,
Yeah.
right? Because I'm totally protecting myself.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. And it, everybody has, like, everyone's going to have a different level of that access point to that sadness. And it's really going to be heavily dictated on by like your environment, who's around you, and how safe you feel to
yeah,
really express both of those emotions.
yeah, absolutely, 100%. And like what you said, I love that you talk about the context because, I've done so much work on myself around shame. And I had an experience at a conference I was just at for 5 days. And one of there was a body language expert, and she pointed something out to me, and I noticed that shame was coming up because she pointed it out in front of 120 people, and I was on stage, right? So we were on stage, and I attacked her, and I'm like, oh wow, that's so interesting. So in this moment, I'm actually moved against. So it was just interesting. So that's what I always tell my women, right? Like, just learn about yourself. Like, don't judge it. Just be like, oh wow, interesting. Holy
Yeah.
moly. I could have done so many different things, right? I could have been like, you're right, or oh, thank you so much, or you know what I mean, or just smile to the audience, make a joke, right? But I chose to attack her, and she's somebody who worked with the CIA and the FBI. I mean, it's somebody who's super solid, right? Complete
Mm.
authority, and so it was really interesting that I'm like, and then I felt more shame because I'm like, oh, now I attacked an expert who's like
Yes.
probably one of the biggest experts in the world on this subject, and questioning her. I questioned her authority.
Yeah. And so I want to talk about, first I want to talk about the last shame shield, and then I want to talk about how we know that we've used a shame shield.
Mm-hmm.
Because I love that example that you just brought up, and I feel like it's just going to help to raise that awareness too.
Yeah,
Um, so
100%.
the last shame shield, or the last trend, is called moving away, and that's when you just piece out of the situation altogether. So if you went out with a guy and he calls you 4 days later when he said he was going to call you 2 days later, that's when you don't pick up the phone. You never call him back. You don't answer texts. You just don't deal with it. And usually there's also some level of telling yourself that you're okay with it. Like, oh, I didn't like him anyway, or oh, I didn't like him, whatever it
Mm-hmm.
was. But you try to make
Mm-hmm.
it okay with yourself that
Mm-hmm.
you didn't have a conversation about it. Or maybe even putting it kind of back on him in your own mind, which is just like, well, if he didn't really want to talk to me anyway, otherwise he would have called me sooner. Like,
Right.
rationalizing it in all kinds of ways. But the end result is that you don't deal with it. And then it's just another wound, and then it's not resolved. And then it's an easier trigger for someone else to push
Yeah.
if, the next time it happens.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Um, so the ways that we know that we've been in shame and used a shame shield, first of all, when we're actually, let's work backwards. We know that we've used a shame shield when we feel more shame, just like you did. When we realize that we've acted outside of our values and that we're not feeling aligned to it at all. And we just walk away from it and we're just like, who was I? What was that? That's not like me at all.
Mm-hmm.
Whoa, is that some semblance of what you experienced?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's really like when we start to feel that, of just like, oh my gosh, I don't even know who that was or where that came from. That's a really good indication that we used a shame shield.
Mm-hmm.
And to back it up even further, we know that we're in shame when we experience the same indicators of the fight or flight response, which is elevated heartbeat, maybe breathing a little shallower, maybe we get a little sweaty, like palms get sweaty or armpits get sweaty, or maybe like fingertips or toes get tingly. Like, whatever it is that usually happens in you when you get that adrenaline rush, you're going to feel something very similar when you begin to have shame. And so the ways that we can begin to just become more aware of that, and then to get ourselves out of it, is to, like, in that moment, say that like when you're on stage, say that you're on stage and you're having somebody bring something to you that's bringing up something that's uncomfortable. And are you okay with us using this example?
Sure.
By the way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool.
I'm all about vulnerability, like.
Okay, yeah, no, I totally appreciate that. I also didn't want to use it if you didn't feel comfortable.
Yeah.
So somebody says something that makes you feel uncomfortable. And so what was it, if you can think back to it, what was it that was happening in your body at the time?
Well, actually, it was really embodied, because she pushed me over because she wanted to point out that I wasn't congruent in my body. So I didn't feel any sweat or anything. It was more like a shock, right? So I didn't feel sweat. There was no heart rate. It was just, I think it came afterwards, because I realized, like, I didn't realize, I was just kind of like scrambling, I will say, right? So, which was perfect, because it actually showed how I really respond, versus if it wouldn't have been a shock response, I would have realized that it's shame. And like, now I can just say, I feel shame right now. This would have been a great enrollment point for the audience, right? So, but because I had the surprise, and I love that, and it really stretched me, and it showed what my real shame shield is versus what my well-trained, like open into shame behavior is. So
yeah. And so
really
that shock.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I love
shock. I mean, imagine you stand somewhere and you talk, and out of the sudden somebody just pushed you over and just wanted to make a point.
Totally. I feel like I'm having like a sympathetic response right now, because my body's getting hot. Like, as I think about somebody shocking me or pushing me over or like jolting me or something, like my body's getting hot. And it's just like, it's empaths, right? We're just like, oh my gosh, I can imagine how you'd feel.
I know.
So when we start to feel that come up, or when we're knocked off course, when we feel that shock, the way that we can begin to get ourselves back on track is really to breathe like down to the base of our lungs, like breathe all the way down. Imagine like breathing down through your feet, and effectively like slowing that moment down. And it could mean removing yourself from the situation, and not in a completely avoidant way where you never come back to it. But like, let's say that you're having a challenging conversation with your partner or with a potential partner, and, something's coming up. You could simply say, it's like, I just need a minute, and just sitting with it and bringing yourself back down, or even saying like, I need 30 minutes and coming back to it. But the piece of it that's really key is committing to a time to come back to it. And the other piece about the fight or flight response, to know, like, for the women, for your men, for women, it takes 30 minutes for our bodies to come back down from that adrenaline response and to get back to our baseline. For men, it takes 2 hours. So if you've gotten in a fight with your partner or a potential partner, I'd say like wait at least 2 hours to revisit anything. If it's really like popped off, or if one of you has really gotten into a really emotional state, wait 2 hours to come back to it, because then you'll be talking to somebody who's really able to show up with their full emotional intelligence on board.
Right. Awesome. Wow, it's been so juicy to hear all those secrets and all those insights. And we're already at the end here. It went by so fast. So Sarah, I'm sure we're all enamored with what you had to share, and learning more about worthiness, right? Which so many single women are really struggling with, even though they're really successful in business. When it comes to love, all of a sudden, show me who you date, and I tell you how high your worthiness factor is, right? And so how can I get a hold of you? Like, do you have anything special for them?
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to offer any women who felt particularly inspired by this call, or, by this interview. And if anything really resonated that you want to learn more about, I would love to offer you a free 30-minute call, and just complimentary to dig into what's coming up for you. And if you have any questions about anything, feel free to contact me. My website is sarahcameron.com. SARACAMERON.com. And you'll find all of my contact information on there. And I'd be happy to talk more about it. You could tell I could talk about this all day, and I jam on it and I love it. And yeah, there's some juicy stuff that I have in the pipeline at the moment that I won't speak to yet, but good stuff coming your way.
Yeah. So sarahcameron.com, right?
Yes.
So very easy, very intuitive. And let me tell you, Sarah is really, I mean, she's going to be at some point, we'll do some sort of other collaborations. That's the last thing you saw of her. She has some really innovative tools, ladies. So just really hop onto her website. If you've done a lot of things that haven't worked, she's definitely your gal, and she gets you the results for sure. And for the ladies who are really still struggling with those emotionally unavailable men, you just can't seem to shake them off your leg, right? And for some reason, a part of you still saying yes, even though you want to say no. Come to findoneelite.com and sign up for my complimentary Find the Right Man clarity call, where we get crystal clear on what is that last part inside of you, or parts, who knows, that I keep saying yes to this, right? Like, where are you still hoping I can turn this man around, right? What needs to be healed, right? So we'll be looking at that and see what structure we can build for you. All right. So with that, we're at the end. Thank you so much for being on the show, Sarah. It was really juicy to have you, really insightful. I always learn so much when I talk to you. And to the listeners, we'll talk to you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.